The year was 1853, and Sacramento was rebuilding from yet another devastating flood. The city planners knew that they needed to find a remedy for this situation. However, it was not until 1862 when yet another catastrophic flood hit the city. It was at this point that the project officially began. Not only did the city suffer from flooding, but fires were commonplace among the hastily constructed wooden buildings. After the flood of 1850, the city planners knew that they needed to find a remedy for the situation. In 1862, a project to raise the city above flood level was accepted. Thousands and thousands of cubic yards were carted in from surrounding areas, using every available filler, such as broken down ships, ballast, and wagons. It was left to the owners of the shops along the streets getting filled in to provide a barrier to the dirt, lest it would all turn to mud and run into the shops. After the streets had been filled in, of course, the buildings still remained at the original ground level. During this time, ladders were installed from the street to access the shops and residences. The jack screw system was used to raise certain buildings. The jack screw is essentially a car jack, and when around 250 of them were placed under a building and turned simultaneously, the building would rise. This method was far from exact, of course. At this time, the laborers did not have access to modern equipment used in ensuring a level surface, so an ingenious idea was put into practice. One resource that Sacramento did not lack was water. So, after a building was raised to its desired height, buckets of water were brought to the floors and roof and poured out. The water would naturally flow to the low areas, and the corrections would be made. One such project, the St. George Hotel, was raised a total of 8 feet in 1866. The raising of the building took a total of 2 weeks, with the weight of the building at 1,900 tons and dimensions of 76 feet by 160 feet. After the buildings were raised, the spaces underneath remained occupied by both reputable businesses, such as banks and shops, as well as less reputable businesses, such as speakeasies. During this time, the city officials were preoccupied with keeping crime to a minimum, though this was difficult due to the new real estate that was perfect to keep business away from the eyes of authority.
In order to avoid flooding, builders raised the streets of Sacramento out of harm's way. They left behind remnants of the original city in a series of underground rooms and tunnels. Walking through these spaces now, with the modern, bustling city above, creates a strange juxtaposition of past and present. The lopsided architecture and uneven bricks speak to a different time. Whiskey bottles can be found in almost every room, and one of the buildings we walked through was actually a brothel in 1850, still displaying some of the high fashions of the time and various personal belongings that were excavated from this dig site, plus a good amount which were supplemented to provide a feel for what life would have been like during these times. A few paces could bring you back out onto the streets of Old Sacramento, where we walked through modern shops and streets, now very much aware of the network of tunnels below.